All right, so hopefully we're recording. So I'm just gonna keep this relatively raw and simple. It's getting pretty late anyways. It's like 3:02 a.m. in the morning, so I'm in the middle of the night talking to myself on a camera, building a model. It's like my old banking days again. So the model is pretty simple. It's really built upon three pieces. So one is the key drivers that you see here with respect to allocated, the key life expectancy, which is the assumed age that we live until, which I would put 85 years old, just assuming that most people will live until 85 years old, with the days in a year 365, which will consist of total days on Earth of 300, basically 30,000 days that we have. We also have a section called the output, which we will take a look at the sleep adjustments after calculating the percentage of life that we'll be spending on sleeping. I believe it's about 1/3, but we could go into the assumptions a little bit later. And also for the essential items that we have here, I just have a placeholder here for now, and we want to look at that by percentage of adjusted life, look at that on how many days in a quantifiable way, and the years as well in a quantifiable multiplier way as well. And shifting gears to the third section, which is the assumptions, which is the interesting, juicy part that we'll spend a little bit of time on. And the key assumption factors I've identified here would be the following with respect to sleep, school, work, eat, bathroom, commute, and sickness. And I believe these are the, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 7 essential factors that I think would make sense to include into this model, just to take a look at like how much are we investing our lives into doing just like the basic essentials as a human being, right? And then take a look at that and then seeing how much remaining time we have on Earth after just doing all of these essential items. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's dive right in, okay? So starting from the top on the key drivers, life expectancy is 85 years old. That's something that we assume. It's 365 days, so basically 30,000 days, right? So let's start from the top with respect to the sleep adjustments. On to the assumptions page, we have sleep. So on as a placeholder, what are the key factors that we want to build into sleep, right? First, we want to look at the hours of sleep per day, and we have 24 hours per day, hours in a day. For me, I think I'm having about 6 to 8 hours of sleep, so let's assume 8 hours for average, and we have 24 hours in a day. Percentage of this would be 8 divided by 24. So we spend about 33% of our days to sleep. So let's calculate towards this, okay? So let's put that 33% here equals to 33% right here. And then the days of lives would be this number, that's 30,000 30,000 days that we have here, assuming that we live until 85 years old, times that by 33%. So that's about 10,000 days that we already adjust for sleep only, and divide by how many days in a year, 365, which would be 28 years that we're spending on just sleeping. Okay, so let's look at the adjusted total days on Earth after just adjusting for sleep. 20.7 thousand days after adjusting for sleep. Okay, so I think I feel pretty good about the first assumptions for sleep, so we're pretty much good to go on this one. So secondly, we want to look at some of the other essential items here, right? So as you can see that I've listed out here for school, work, eat, bathroom, commute, and sickness, right? So starting from the top with school. So I think for school, there are a couple of things that we might want to think about, right? First is the duration of our education, right? So we assume that we are attending pre-K all the way to college undergrads, graduations, and the age range is about like, I believe the age of 4 all the way to 21. And assuming that for us going to school, I think we spend about 10 hours per day for school. We are also spending about 5 days per week. I know some other people in other countries might spend about 6 days in school. I think Japan probably has like a 6-day school period, but just on average, I would say globally speaking, I think average about 5 days per week. And we also want to take a look at how many weeks do we spend going to school as well. I think after discounting like holidays and after discounting like summer vacations and all that stuff, I think that's about I believe 40 weeks, I think, I'm not too sure. So let's put these assumptions here, right? So firstly, on top, we know that pre-K and undergrad, so pre-K to college undergrads, so that's about like the age range from 21 to 4. So that's, so 21 minus 4 equals to 17. And then hours per day, let's assume that we go to school, you wake up, I don't know, 8 a.m. for school, you go to school at, and then you get ready and you get to school at 9 a.m. So from 9 a.m. all the way to, you probably get off school around, I don't know, 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. And then you have to do homework and all that stuff. So it's about like 10 hours per day. So let's put 10 hours. And work days per week. Oh, I should put school days per week. Doesn't matter. So school days per week, it's about 5 days per week. And the work week would be 40. So let's assume all of that, right? So how many days would that look like if you calculate all of this together, right? So the calculation should look something like this, right? So it should be like 10, so let's parenthesize this, 10 divided by 24 minus 8. And the reason we do 24 minus 8 is because we want to adjust for the time that we are not sleeping. So we're assuming 8 hours of sleep per day, right? And then parenthesize times that by 5 divided by 7. 5 divided by 7 because we are spending 5 days per week on sleep out of the 7 days week. And times that by the ratio of 40 divided by 52 weeks because we have 52 weeks in a year, and then times that by 17 years that we're spending in school in total from pre-K all the way to college undergrads. 17 times that by 17. So now we have all the ratios, and then times that by 365 days. That's in total of about 2,131 days. Okay, so let's look at that on a percentage basis divided by how many adjusted days on Earth. It's about 10%. So we spent about 10% in school. So let's plug that in here. So 10% equals to 10%. Let's look at that by days times this by this number. Divide by 365 days. 6 years. So we spent about 6 years in school from pre-K to college undergrads. Okay. So the next one would be work. So work would be, let's assume you work from the age of 21 all the way to 65. Let's assume you finish college, your undergrad's degrees in college, and you go straight to work at the age of 21 after you graduate. So you work from 21 to 65. And for the assumptions, I think, assuming you work 10 hours, like the hours of work, hour per day for work. You also want to look at the workday days per week, just like the top on the school section, and the work week per year as well. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Okay, so starting from the top, 65, so 65 minus 21, 44 years. Assume you work 44 years from the age of 21 and you retire at 65. And the hours per day for work, I think most people work like 10 hours, including myself. And the work days per week, I think most people work 5 days, Monday to Friday. Obviously, some people work until Saturday or Sunday, depending on what type of job you are in, obviously. But I think on average, it's about 5. So let's put 5. And then work week per year. I know there are 52 weeks in a year, but we want to discount like, your vacation times off, your PTO and all that stuff. So for me, I think I work about 48 weeks per year. Obviously, some people work like completely full-time, and some people work way less. But I think on average, like, I think most people work from the range of like 40 weeks all the way to 52. So on an average basis, about like 48. So let's put 48. So 10 hours per day divided by 24 minus 8. And the 24 minus 8 again is because we want to adjust that for the sleep that we are incurring, and then times that by 5 divided by 7 because we are spending 5 days per week, times 48 divided by 52 because that's the amount of weeks that we spend in work, and then times that by 44 years because we work from the age of 21 all the way to 65, and then times that by 365. So in total, we spent about 6,618 days just for work. So let's look at that on a percentage ratio, okay? So on an adjusted basis, 6,618 days divided by the adjusted total days on Earth, 32%. So we spent a quite significant amount of time working, which is 1/3 of our lives, basically. So we spent about 18 years of our lives, or 32% of our adjusted total days on Earth after incorporating sleep adjustments. So now moving on to eat, which is another essential things that we do on a day-to-day basis. So we eat every single day, right? So 365 days. I mean, that's pretty normal, right? Most people eat every single day. I don't think there's any, I mean, some people probably fast sometimes, but I would assume that most people would eat every single day, or at least once or one time or multiple times per day, right? So we want to look at that times per day. So I would say most people would eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Obviously, some people have suppers, and bodybuilders, or like people that are that like to have, I don't know. Some people have different people have different types of eating habits, but I would assume that most people have like 3 times per day. So let's just assume 3, and let's assume like how many hours per meal do we invest per meal per day. So I would assume that we spend about 1 hour per meal. I think for me, I spend about like an hour for lunch, an hour for dinner, maybe a little bit less for breakfast. It's mostly just pretty quick for me for breakfast. But I would assume that average-wise, most people spend about an hour per meal. So let's just put 1 hour for this, okay? And I think that's pretty sufficient for the assumptions for eat. So let's just take these out for now. And the way we could calculate this would be the following. So 3 times per week. The reason that I'm doing this 3 times per week is because, not 3 times per week, I'm sorry, 3 hours per week, because we're assuming that we're spending 3 times of eating time, 3 intervals, and then 1 hour per meal. So it's basically 3 hours of your days on just eating, right? So 3 hours divided by your adjusted time, which is 28 minus 8, again, close parentheses, times 365. So 365 days. And then you want to times that by 85, because we are expecting to eat every single day. I don't think you skip a meal. You probably eat more when you're a baby. Probably eat less when I don't know, when you're busy, when you're like in your I don't know. Anyways, let's just try to keep it simple for ourselves. 3 hours per day, 365 days, 85 years. Okay. So 5,817 days. So let's look at that on a quantifiable perspective. Adjusted total days on Earth. So we spent about 28% on just eating, okay? 28%, let's put that right here. Same thing again, times this by this number, and quantify. So 16 years on just eating. I think that makes sense. That makes sense to me. And then the next one would be the bathroom. So I think we go to bathroom every day. I think for most people, we go to bathroom every day. I know I go to bathroom every single day, multiple times a day. We want to look at that times per day, and we also want to look at the hours per session. I think that's sufficient for the assumptions for bathrooms. So obviously 365 days, we go to bathroom every single day. Most people go to bathrooms maybe like 4 to 6 times a day, depending on how much water you drink or how much coffee you drink. I think you want to also incorporate like brushing your teeth and like, I don't know, checking yourself out in the mirror and all that stuff. So, and obviously doing like the number 1 and number 2. Some people do number 2 longer. Some people do number 1 longer because they probably reading a magazine on toilet or something. But I think 0.25 hours, it's pretty logical. So 0.25 is basically the amount of time that we spend, in the bathroom per sessions, of 4 sessions in total. So I think in a 60 minutes ratio perspective, times that by 25%, I think that makes a lot of sense for me. It's about 1/4 of an hour, right? So let's do the calculations in the below. So we know we're spending 0.25 hours per session. So let's 0.25 times 4 times per day, and then you want to divide that by the ratio 24 minus 8, because I don't think you're pooping or peeing when you're sleeping, right? So you want to adjust for that time, and then times that by 365, and then times that by 85, which is the life expectancies. So that totals to be correct 1900 days for just bathroom. Whew. So let's see what's the percentage of this. 19,000 divided by 20,000. 9%. 9% right here. 9% of 20,000 days. And so we spent 5 years in the bathroom in our lives. Whew. Okay. Interesting. And then the next one would be commuting. Commuting, so I think most people commute every single day, especially for people that lives in the city and people that, I don't know. I think everybody commutes every single day. And I think on average, people commute going to work and commute going back home and incorporating traffic and all that stuff. Let's think about this. Hours per day on commuting and times per week commuting. So hours per day commuting, I think 2 hours per day makes sense. I know for me, I take about like an hour and 45 minutes to commute from me from where I live all the way to the city in New York and coming back. So that's about like 3.5 hours per day for me. But I think that's a little high for me because I do live kind of far away. So we might want to haircut that by a little bit. I think on average, most people spend like maybe 45 minutes to an hour to commute every single day and going to work and coming back from work. So I would say 2 hours per day makes sense to me. And then we want to look at that, the times per week. I think for most people, 5 times per week is their average days that they go to work. But we also want to incorporate like maybe getting groceries and like maybe going somewhere to meet with your friends and stuff like that. So commuting 6 times per week makes sense. We spend maybe 1 day just at home chilling. So 6 days makes sense to me. So let's look at like how many days do we commute. So the formula should look something like this. 2 divided by, again, 24 minus 8, because we're going to look at that adjusted by the sleep, times that by 6 times per week. 6 divided by 7, because we are commuting 6 times per week. And then we want to commute. Interesting. How many days do we commute? Well, you don't really commute when you're a baby. So, but you are still commuting because like your parents taking you somewhere, right? From the age of 4 all the way to 21. It's just a matter of like, are you commuting by yourself mobily or is someone transporting you from point A to point B, like via your parents? You also want to think about like you are commuting when you're working as well. So I think it makes sense to use the range of the time, the amount of years that you go to school and you go to work as just like a basis of the assumptions. So I think, yeah, so let's times this by the sum of this number, 17, and the time that you go to work, 44. I think that makes sense in total of the amount of days that you go to work and go to school. And then times that by 365. So 2,400 days basically on just commuting. So let's look at that on a percentage basis divided by total adjusted days. 12 days, 12%. So let's inject that here, 12% times this by the 20,000 days adjusted. 7 years on commuting. Okay. Lastly, we want to look at sickness. Let's look at sickness, shall we? So regular sick days. How many times are we sick? I think that's an interesting question that we want to think about. So let's assume, how many times are we sick per year? Times we are sick per year. That's an interesting question to say. I don't know if I've been sick for the last 5 years. For me, I haven't been to a doctor for the last 5-6 years. So for me, I might be an outlier. But for people that that could get sick often, like coughing and I don't know, sneezing or like not feeling so good, I think 3 times per year can make sense. I'm not too sure. So, but let's assume like 3 times per year, right? And assuming 85, and we want to look at that by regular sick days versus like serious sick days, right? We want to look at by serious sick days, right? Like regular sick would be like a minor fever or whatever. A serious sick day would be maybe you need surgery, you might have to go to a hospital and all that, or like something more serious. I think 3 times per year for regular sickness makes sense. So times that by 85, assuming that we are living until 85 years old. So that's 255 days that we spend in the hospital. Not in the hospital, for the regular sickness. And for serious sickness, I think we could just make a high level assumptions of most people, if you're lucky, I think 10 days in the hospital for your whole life, I would consider yourself to be pretty lucky. But I think some people might have, I don't know, unfortunate accidents that might require them to be staying in the hospital or have surgeries or have like longer clinical treatments. So let's assume 30 days. I think that makes sense. So let's plug that in here. So equals to the sum of this number, 25 plus 30. So 285 days. So it's almost like a little bit under a year for just being sick. So divide this by the total adjusted days, about 1%, which makes sense, I think, if you're lucky, obviously. 1% times this by adjusted total, and then the placeholders. What other things am I missing? I think that's pretty good. I don't have anything else to add onto this essentials. So let's take these out. Just keep this here, and then let's look at how much are we adding up together. Ooh, 93. Oops, that's not right. Let's see how many days do we have. Quantify. Ooh, almost 20,000 days. 53 years on essentials. That's massive. Ooh. So let's add that up together, shall we? So 100% minus 93%. We have 7% left. What is the 7% consisted of? So 20,000 minus 19,000, which we've all added up together, 1,500 days. Interesting. Well, let's see how much is that by year. So, wow, interesting. So assuming that we adjusted for sleep and we adjusted for the essentials, 10% for school, 32% for work, 28% for eating, 9% for bathroom, 12% for commuting, which I find that to be crazy, 1% for sickness, and all the other miscellaneous, we spend 93% of our waking lives, 53 years of our lives doing all of these essentials, right? And we have 7% of our adjusted lives after adjusting for sleep. Remember, you still spend 1/3 of your life sleeping, which is 20 years on just sleeping. You have 4 years left remaining. So you really want to think to yourself, are you utilizing your time wisely? Maybe something to think about. Yeah.